I don't know what you've done to me. I know this thing is true. I want to do some real bad things with you. Do love a good spot of tea, don't you? So in the intro, that little quote was from a song by Jace Everett. It's technically neo-southern rock. That was also the theme song for a show that came out 10 some odd years ago called True Blood. It was on HBO and was based on a series of novels called Southern Vampire. Since I am presently living in the South, and it's also the middle of the rainy season, I decided it was a good one to watch, and it's cold out here. Oof. Actually right in the middle of a rainstorm right now, and also today is the day before Halloween as I'm recording this, so another reason for me to watch the show. I actually started watching it not long after I touched down here. Okay? So, I want to talk about this. I want to add some logic to the lore and the world of True Blood. Okay? So, let's dive in, shall we? By the way, my name is Richard Vigorelli, and this is the Vigorelli Institute. Cheers. I'm drinking Earl Grey, by the way. So, let's dive into this world, shall we? Now, in this world, vampires are a thing. So are werewolves. And so are fairies, among other supernatural creatures like were-panthers, were-tigers, and yada yada yada. Anyway, the only thing we're going to focus on is the vampires. Because they're kind of the focus of the story and everything else is just kind of going around them and humans. Okay? So in this world, a vampire is an undead human. It is a human that has been bitten by a vampire and then had some of the vampire's blood fed to it. Okay? So, about a day or so later, the human then rises from apparent death and is a blood drinker themselves. This might get a little graphic. It gets worse from here. Okay? And the interesting part about this kind of vampire is as the vampire gets older, it presumably drinks more blood and therefore gains more strength. So the older the vampire, the stronger the vampire. There is a critical mass at some point where the vampire gains extra powers like, say, flight, super speed, super strength, the ability to hypnotize anybody they please, which is the hypnosis / glamour thing, from what I can tell from the lore, is basic to everyone. However, not everybody can do it as well. Okay? So, you have a predatory and parasitic element in society that has been persistent for thousands of years. Very first, I would call BS on the humans not knowing vampires exist. I'm willing to bet they would be like common knowledge. Like, fish swim, birds fly, and oh, by the way, if you see your buddy and he was dead a couple of days ago and you see him again, it's bad. Run. Okay? Now, one of the interesting parts about this is how the vampires exist. Okay? Their lifespan is indeterminate because they're essentially immortal in their death unless they come across one of three things. The first one is, of course, sunlight. They take a walk out on a bright sunny day. It's their last one. They tend to burst into flames at that point. Love Earl Grey. 2. Silver. They are deathly allergic to it, and can actually be used to restrain them and weaken them, depending on age. The super young ones kills them outright. And 3, the heart gets destroyed. Now, according to the lore, it has to be done either by silver or by wood. Lead won't do it. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And someone who has used weapons his entire life, I'll explain that later. Probably in the next video, because I'm going to break this up into 2. It's going to be a long one, kids. Okay? So, getting a little bit menacing with that hood. So what happens when they die... also, another way that they die is not just the destruction of the heart, but also if you remove the head, they die. And the dying is a little bit more dramatic than just and it's over. They explode. Yes, that is a thing. That is a thing that happens in this show. They explode. Like a very, very wet, sinewy piñata. Yeah. Very striking, especially since we're on HBO, and they're probably trying to get views, because holy crap, I want to see that happen again. Okay? These are weird. About halfway through the pint now. Okay, and we're going to grab that. There we go. Alrighty. So, the vampire dies, they're lost forever. Now, in the lore, there's some allusion to that they can be redeemed in that death and become a good soul. But as long as the vampire persists, they are kind of able to do whatever it is that they please. There's no rhyme or reason as to why they do things other than to obtain. Okay? Apparently they exist solely to feed and gain power. Like I said, the older the vampire, the stronger it is. Now, because of that, the vampires have created a society parallel to humans. Now, in the show, what we see of it is it's a feudal, monarchical society. As in, we have a monarch, usually a king, got court of nobles, court of sub-nobles, and then regular vampire peasantry, and then humans all the way at the bottom that they use for food and or progeny. Now, because the vampires can't breed biologically like humans can, they have to, every once in a while, turn a human in order to replenish their numbers that will, every once in a while, take a hit. Okay? And they do that through that whole feeding ritual thing, and there's also a religious ritual that goes along with it, whereas the sire lays down with the victim, and they wake up together, yada yada yada. Okay. You. Alright. So within this feudal society, you can rise through the ranks either through favor or by offing the one nearby, and you just kind of take over because reasons. Yeah. Talk about feudal, a little bit proto-feudal. Feudal. This is very akin to kind of Bronze Age and Iron Age form monarchical governments, where if you wanted to be king, the only thing you had to do was get rid of the current king. And hey, congratulations! Mazel tov, you're in. Yeah! Watch your back, son. So, that actually does make a lot of sense to me. I would expect a government and a society like that to function in a very barbarian fashion like that. Okay? There's some problems here, and I'll get to that in a moment. So, within vampire society, you get bitten, you turn, and now you are a baby vamp. and you start your feeding and learning how the society functions and all of this. But because you cannot die, unless by very specific means, which are actually pretty easy to get past, the world is kind of your oyster. You can do anything that you want with it, which fosters a thing called hedonism. Because of this, vampires tend to be very, very hedonistic. They can do what they want with who they want, when they want, and for whatever reason that they want. And this is shown in the show as things like homosexuality, all the stuff that in the early part of the turn of the century was considered very, very taboo. The vampires do it because why the hell not? Okay? So, as a result of this, vampire society would be inherently very hedonistic, which hedonism tends to weaken the society that you are in, because you tend not to pay attention to the things that actually matter because you are living in the moment. Okay? You are pursuing pleasure rather than happiness. Okay? Pleasure is very fleeting. Happiness and joy are long-term and very circumstantial. Okay? So, the reason for that is what's called I've got time fallacy. Okay? I've got loads of time to do whatever it is I want. I'll get to it tomorrow. Thing is, that tomorrow never comes, and by the time you need to get it done, it's already too late. Okay? Which is why, back in my youth, I lived in the moment, didn't go very well. I actually starved. Okay, moving on. So what I would expect in this society, assuming a barbaristic and feudal system being in place, is the monarch is going to change a lot. It may take 100 years, but it ain't gonna take long, okay? Since lifespan of a vampire is indeterminate, 100 years ain't that big of a deal, okay? Well, 4 years ain't that big of a deal. It's practically a weekend for them, okay? So, things would probably take a very, very long time to happen in that society. The reason being is they got the time to wait, or at least they think they do. So, I would also expect any political, economic, social, or environmental crisis to be rather long-lasting, at least from a human perspective. Remember, the average human, assuming a decent lifestyle and not exactly spectacular or wonderful medical intervention for any given condition, is going to live to be about 60, 70 years old, give or take. Okay? The vampires, given that their lifespan is indeterminate, and a human crisis is usually going to last, 3, 4 years, historically speaking, average, sometimes a little bit longer, often a bit shorter. Theirs is probably going to last, a few decades to a couple of centuries. Okay? That is, we don't have enough food. We're starving. Well, it's going to take you a few years to actually, stop functioning, so, yeah. Okay? Now, as the human world would continue to progress, they would obviously take notice of things happening around them, because, yes, humans are idiots, but they're not blind. Okay? Certain things would happen that would then translate into vampire society. Okay? For example, the feudal system that the vampires use in the show would actually be very obsolete by the time of the events of the show. I would expect them to be in relative keeping with human societies, in that while there is a kingdom of Mississippi, like there is in the show, and a kingdom of Louisiana, like in the show, there could be a republic of North Texas, or a oligarchy of Algonquin, okay? Possibly the Poconos. That's a mountain range up in the northeast of the United States, is its own thing. Could be a fascist totalitarian state for all we know, or they could be a communist republic. No idea. I'm leaning communist because of where it is. Okay? I would expect that when those ideologies were created in humans, that as those humans were bitten and turned vampire, their political philosophy still would have persisted, and would have eventually moved into vampire society, and the vampire nations would be just as much of a patchwork of ideologies, both similar and differing as ours are today, and would be in that universe. Also, vampires would kill each other. Humans kill each other all the time. We call it war. We call it assassination. We do all kinds of things to each other. Vampires would do exactly the same thing because they're basically us, only less inhibited. Okay? So I would expect there to be not only a very quick succession of rulers, but also the only thing more dangerous than, the anti-vampire brigade of humans coming to get you is another vampire. Okay? Also, they really know how to kill each other, which would make sense. Right? So I would expect some very, very interesting intrigue, and also the capacity to stand against that intrigue within vampire society. So the inner workings of vampire society would be unbelievably complicated. Also, probably very ritualized. Probably very, very old, because one of the things you do have to remember is the older the vampire, the stronger it is. Which means the rulers would be conceivably 2,000-3,000 years old, maybe a few hundred at the youngest. At that time, they would have greatly favored ritual. The young vampires, on the other hand, may or may not. It would be something they would have to learn how to swallow. I know. And it would be something that they would have to figure out how to work with and how to work around. So there would be a lot of bowing, there would be courtly speech. So the vampires would either have their own language or a subdialect of the language that they inhabit. So let's say they live in the U.S., in the southern states, they would not be talking like your average southerner. They would be talking like themselves. They may have a southern accent, maybe, but the words chosen and the meaning of those words would be different. There would also be certain things that you would say in court to get what you want that you would never, ever, ever, under any circumstances in general society, ever say. Because you die. I would expect a vampire court to very much so resemble a Japanese shogunate court, or the court of, say, the Tudors, where you walk in and you do the right thing, or you have a bad day that day, and by the way, it's your last day. Okay? Let's see here, what else is there? Also, because of their general invulnerability to most forms of injury, it'll hurt them, but it ain't gonna kill them. Certain weapons would exist within vampire society that would be very, very specific for getting around whatever defenses and natural abilities that vampires would have. And those would be used to great extent during civil wars, wars of conquest, and just simple territorial disputes between competing vampire nations. Okay? Depending on the permeability of borders, obviously. Also, I would expect there to be some kind of vampire religion, because one of the things that I've noticed with humans is we're kind of hardwired to like things greater than ourselves. So I would expect in this society there to be something that they hold sacred, especially among the old lot. Okay? Now, blood to them is life. So, their religion would probably have something to do with blood. Not only that, the vampire dialect would probably have idioms reflecting blood and reflecting sunlight and various other things. Sunlight for humans is good. So, I'm feeling bright today. Okay? Would be a bad thing if a vampire were to say it. If he's feeling bright, it means life is not good. I would also be willing to bet that if you wanted to wish someone good luck in their venture, you would say something like, "May the blood flow." I guess. I don't know. I'm not a vampire, despite my lineage. Okay? And I would also expect that whatever deity that they have, assuming that there is one, would be very, very close, almost the epitome of what it is that they are. Okay? Just like it is with humans. Okay? All of our deities embody the values and virtues that we consider good in our society. And so forth. Okay? So, that is what I would expect vampire society to look like in the universe of True Blood. Okay? I'm going to be back in a little bit, as soon as I get me a little bit more tea, because I'm about out and it's a little chilly. I'm going to talk about how the humans would react to this. Okay? And we'll make a couple of assumptions there. So, I will be back later, and a little bit of housekeeping before I go ahead and jump off. At Vigorelli Institute, this is essentially a brand new channel, coming off of Vigorelli Integrated Medicine, because I wanted to talk about some other stuff, and I kind of ran out of ideas to do things. So, I have launched a Patreon. So if you like this work, if you want to submit some ideas for me to go over, whatever it may be, feel free to pop on over there and donate some money. I'm going to be figuring out the pricing schedule there in a minute, so please be patient with me. We'll get there. All right? I'll be back later, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.